And so from there went to Purdue for mechanical engineering. I graduated from Purdue and started working for a company in Indy that had actually been a sponsor of my team in high school. And so I was able to use the connections, the mentors that I had to help get an internship in college and a full-time job after. And while I was working there, I saw a job posted to be the kit of parts engineer for FRC, working for First in Manchester. And so said to my wife, hey, how would you feel about moving to New Hampshire and me going to work for First? And she said, that sounds fine, sounds great. I just have one question. Where is New Hampshire? And so I think it's like a little bit north of Boston. And so we said, okay, we can make that work. And so got the job at First, worked in FRC, did a parts engineer for about 5 years. At that point, also had my first son, and so decided to move back to Indy to be closer to family. And at that point, First was not really set up to be like somewhere that you could work remotely, like a lot of places in the early 2010s. That just wasn't really a thing. And so I unfortunately had to leave First. But pretty much as soon as I left, I immediately missed it and started talking to people about, are there roles that I could do from Indy? And it took about 18 months, but found a role that I was qualified for. From 100 sponsors or so and across all programs. I did that role for about 3 years, and then moved an opportunity to go back into FRC came up, and I took that in 2021. Was the program manager for FRC for the 2022 season, basically, and then Frank retired that summer, and I applied for the director role and got it fall of 2022, so a little over a year ago. And I've been in this role now for 16 months or so. And so that's kind of my background. But 20 years ago I was just like all those students, right? Like sitting, waiting for kickoff of my senior year, not really knowing what the future held, but loving being a part of First and being on the team.
And a good introduction. We did a little bit of a lesson about your past a little bit. So earlier that you worked with Bastion and Rollfield and some other things you did. Some of my questions were kind of about your time out in the field, even though it wasn't all your time. How did your stuff that you learned at First apply to actual engineering jobs, but then also non-engineering?
Yeah. I think some of the biggest things for me, I actually started to realize this as I was going through my engineering coursework in school, was like when I was in a class that was talking about gear ratios and gear reductions and gear tooth strength and kind of all of those things, and we're talking about controls, I immediately had something that I could apply it to. I could make what I was learning very, very real for me in a lot of my engineering classes in a way that some of my peers in school that hadn't had that kind of hands-on experience really couldn't do, right? Like it was all theoretical for them, whereas I was really trying to think about because at the time I was also still volunteering with First. And so I wasn't mentoring. I didn't have the ability to mentor and be in college. I learned that after one semester, but I was volunteering at events, and so I could still apply things to what I was doing. And I think then I carried that forward into my career from a technical aspect, but then also learning how to work under a deadline, learning how to work as part of a team, sometimes with people that I didn't always get along with, but I still had to work with them because they're my colleagues or they're my teammates or anything like that. We kind of talk about some of those non-engineering skills or non-technical skills that you learn as part of FIRST, and I definitely, like, that's not lip service to me. I definitely felt that in my career. And then the role that I had at Bastion was called an applications engineer, and I actually liken it to the closest job that you can get to actually being on FIRST team. Like, my job was, customers would call up and say, hey, we've got this automation problem, this industrial automation problem, and we need you all to design a robot or design, a piece of equipment to solve this problem for us. And then we would do that, right? Like, we would concept it out, and put a proposal together and say, okay, here's what it'll do, and here's how much it'll cost, and here's how long it'll take, and then try to get them to buy it. And sometimes they would, and sometimes they wouldn't. But that whole kind of like, okay, here's a problem, we got to design something new to solve it, or we got to look into the past and be like, okay, this is kind of similar to that job we did 2 years ago, but a little bit different. And so the experience that I built through, being involved with FIRST of like, okay, here's a new problem and a new challenge, and what can we learn and what can we do differently to solve this problem was incredibly applicable to that role as well. And Bastion as a company, like, I really started to push them, so like, we need to recruit FIRST alumni. Like, these are the people that we want to be, working here as engineers, as technicians, like, because they're used to solving these problems in exactly this way. And it was like, we would order things from IndyMart. Like, we would order things from these FRC suppliers because it's like, there's a parts that I know how to work with, we can get them quickly, I know their quality, And so, like, we introduced this whole other ecosystem of vendors to that company because of what the first people in the group were doing. And so that was a really interesting part of that job.
Other questions. So, to the parts engineer, what made you want to be in that role?
I thought, and at that point, the kit of parts was very different than it is now. It really was like, on kickoff day, everybody got the exact same tote, right? Like, here's a box of all of your stuff, and if you use it, that's great, and if you don't, it goes and sits on a shelf. And as I was interviewing for the role, because I think one of the things that you learn as you advance through your career is like, they're not just interviewing you for a job, you're interviewing them as well, right? And so in talking to Kate Pelot, who was the person that hired me, she had this vision of transforming the kit to make it more usable and more valuable to teams at different points in their kind of first journey, right? And so she was talking about things like vouchers and first choice and opting out of things and getting other things in return. And she kind of had this vision, but as one person doing the kit for, at that point, 2,000, 2,500 teams, like, she just didn't have the bandwidth to execute that. And so it was like, A, I get to work for FIRST and I get to work for FRC, and so that sounds cool. But B, I get to work for somebody who kind of has this vision of how can we make this thing more valuable for teams, in 2010 than it was in 2000, and kind of how can we keep pushing this forward? And so that was what really, I think, kind of sold me on the role was, I'm not just coming in to keep doing the same old thing over and over, but it's like, let's listen to the community, let's talk to teams, let's figure out what they want, and let's see how we can make this, this aspect of the program as valuable as it can be for as many teams as possible.
How much of an impact do you think that made in your decision making, or do you think that made a difference? And how do you think the program compares to when you applied, and what opportunities are there?
Yeah. So being from Indiana, like, as soon as I decided on engineering, it was kind of Purdue was the only choice, and so it being in-state and all of that. So that's the only place that I applied, even before I knew I was going to get the scholarships. I don't think I found that out until like April. And so the impact that it made, it introduced me to some people, within the engineering faculty that I otherwise wouldn't have known. But the big thing for me was that it allowed me to go through school without, kind of the added financial burden, or knowing that I'm going to come out with a ton of debt or something like that. And so that was a big help. The other kind of thing, there was a GPA requirement for it. I had to keep my GPA above a certain point, and based on my GPA, the one semester that I mentored, like if I would have kept being a mentor, I would have lost the scholarship, probably. And so it made that decision very easy for me. It was like, okay, I can continue to volunteer, but maybe the everyday mentoring, and I was mentoring the rookie team, is not what I need to be doing right now for my long-term future. And so yeah, I think that was kind of the thought process and how I think it helped me. And then, I mean, the engineering school at Purdue, I was just there over the summer because the IRI, the Indiana Robotics Invitational, was in Lafayette, not far from Purdue. So I took the opportunity, took my kids and walked them around the campus, and the campus itself has changed so much in the last 15 years. That I got lost in the buildings. The engineering buildings are so nice now, so much nicer than they were when I was there. And I know that makes me sound very old saying that, but I still think it's a great program and an amazing campus. And if you're interested in staying involved with FIRST, I know that there are Kettering and other universities in Michigan that do a lot with FIRST, but Purdue is kind of in that upper echelon, I think. Their student organization, Purdue FIRST programs, does events across all programs, mentors teams across all programs, there's leadership opportunities, and so there are so many ways to stay involved and to build a community there of people. There are so many people that I know who have met lifelong friends through Purdue FIRST and have met their spouses through Purdue FIRST. And so it's just it's a great way to kind of build a community of people there, to not just be people that you volunteer with, but people that help you with your classes and help you with the life changes that come along with going to college and all that other stuff.
Well, how do you see the vision going forward for FIRST Robotics as things do now that the past COVID kind of gave you wanting to come back? Where do you see things going?
Yeah, I think my focus right now is really on reducing barriers to entry into the program and increasing the value of the program that people see. And so things like the KitBot that we're doing this year, right, to make it easier for new teams to come on and have that immediate success, right? If here's something that we can build, we can go out on the field with it and contribute to our alliance, score points in autonomous, do all of these things. I think we're really excited for this year. We're excited to learn, how people use it, what people add on to it. And so that's more things like that to help lower the barrier to entry. And I think that helps with a couple of things. It helps bring on new teams and for the students, for schools, for administrators who are having to say oh, can we really keep keep designating all of this space for schools, or for our teams to have space to build and to practice. And so we're looking at things like mentor professional development and mentor certifications, where as a mentor or a volunteer, you could get certified in things that then you could put on your resume to help you as you're looking for a promotion at work or looking for your next job. We've started doing things around student certifications, and we're continuing to build that out so that kids can come out of the program with this whole suite of certifications based on technical and non-technical skills that they've learned in the program. I'll say the thing that we haven't really cracked yet is how can we increase the value for those school administrators, right, your principals and your superintendents. We've got like this 12-year longitudinal study that shows the impact of first participation on students. And so we're talking about what if you did another one of those that, in addition to measuring the impact on students, also measured the impact of having a first team on the school, right? Are there increases that the school sees in areas that they care about that come from, having a first team? We've heard some things anecdotally, but the ability to go back and say, like, here's, outside, independent, peer-reviewed research that shows these gains by having a first team as part of your school or school district, I think would help, again, increase that value on the investment for the people that ultimately make the decision, in a lot of cases, on if a team does or does not exist, or, if you get your regional paid for, or your event paid for quickly, or if they cut that check so you can buy your parts, right? Like there can be a lot of bureaucracy sometimes with the schools because our program is so different than what they're used to dealing with. And so helping them understand and really see that value to then make things easier on you as a mentor, on the students, to actually go and like build a robot through the program. So you're not trying to also, deal with that headache.
It seemed like the intention was to make the first tech challenge system and the first robotic systems more similar and closer together, or using the exact same system. Is that
it is, yeah. Our ultimate goal, and it'll ultimately depend on the bids we get back, the proposals that we get back from folks, because you never know, right, when you put an RFP out there, what people can actually do. But the goal is that the core controller, so think about the Robo Rio right now, that could be used on an FTC robot or an FRC robot, so that as students progress from FTC onto FRC teams, or as FRC teams are mentoring FTC teams, or mentors that coach both or volunteer at both programs, just so that there's that level of familiarity and comfort with working with that technology, right? It's right now it's really hard if you're really deep at FRC to go and help an FTC team that's having problems if you've not experienced that. Whereas we think by making that controller specifically common, it will, kind of, again, remove that barrier. And there will be differences then, throughout the rest of the robot. The power distribution is different because FRC robots use a ton more power than FTC robots do. The way motors and motor controllers are built in for FRC robots is different than FRC for the FTC. And so there will be differences kind of once you get away from that. But the goal is like, okay, if we can make that common, then we think that we can, again, remove a barrier to participation there, for a lot of folks.
Yeah. Delphi, you've been trying to figure out this pin that you wore on your shirt, what is that?
That is a first alumni pin. So it's not, and if you look, I think, if you look at last year's kickoff, I'm wearing the same pin. And so it's not any kind of game hint or anything like that. It's just the way the light was catching it, it just looks really shiny. But it's just a first alumni pin, yeah.
Thank you. That was a lot.
Yeah, nothing secret. That's funny. That's funny.
All right. Students, who's up first?
I heard before that you mentioned big sponsors giving to some teams. So what do those teams generally do to get on that list of teams that are on?
It really, kind of depends by sponsor. And so, like, NASA focuses a lot on funding teams in their first and second year. Their goal is, right, if you can remove that financial burden from teams in their first year and second year, then you can allow them to go out and fundraise for buying shop supplies or things like that that they're going to need for the future. A lot of the companies that my team dealt with, one of the main factors in sponsorship was if you had an employee from that company who was a mentor on that team. And so that was kind of one of those big deciding factors. Others were more focused on, less on like, do you have an employee, and more on like, just are you in a geographic region where we are? So we've got a plant in this area, and so we're looking, 50-mile radius of that plant kind of thing. But I'll say for, if there were 100 sponsors, there were 100 different criteria that the sponsors would use to select teams. Some focus only on one program or others, some do multiple programs, but it really varies. But I think the two most common were with employee mentors and teams in a certain geographic region.
Based on your current knowledge about FRC, so what would you do if you were going to start?
If I were going to start a team, what would I do? That's a great question. I think the first thing that I would do is try to find a couple of mentors, technical or non-technical, that had first experience, either as a student or as a mentor or a volunteer. And really across any program, right? Even if I was starting an FRC team, I think that experience mentoring an FPC team would be just as applicable. And then, depending on their skill set, that would allow me to figure out, okay, where do I need to focus my time? So if I bring on some technical mentors, maybe I need to focus my time on the fundraising and administrative tasks. If I bring on people who are really good at grant writing, but not as good at the technical side, then I need to make sure we're ready at kickoff to build a robot. I would also try to find a veteran team in my area that could mentor me as a team. That my students could talk to their students, my mentors could talk to their mentors. If we could either visit their build space or even sometimes build out of their build space with us and just kind of see how they work, I think that would be incredibly valuable too, because think back to your first year on the team, you have no idea, right? What you're working towards, where you're going, and so then a whole team of students who are in that boat, the ability to watch other kids who have been through the program before and see okay, this is how hard they work, and so that's how hard we're going to have to work too, I think would be incredibly valuable for them, and to help kind of coach them and steer them along the way. And so those are the things that I think I would do, I would really focus on trying to build out that support system, both with mentors for the team itself, but then other teams of people in the region that could help us, even if they're not technically a mentor on our team.
So what do you think are the most important processes, goals, and values for
I think I think one of the most important things that you learn as part of FIRST is that eventually there is a deadline. And you've got your event, and you've got to have the robot ready for your event, and that is going to be applicable to the rest of your life, no matter what you do. You're going to have deadlines that are set by other people and that you think are way too soon, and that there's no way you can get stuff done in time for them, and you've got to figure out a way to get something ready for that. Kickoff is in 16 days, and I wish that we had another month, but we don't. We have to have the field and the game and everything ready to go in 16 days, and so I think that's a real skill that you learn. I think obviously the gracious professionalism, the working with others, all of that is also incredibly valuable. And I have one more, but then it escaped me. So I'll maybe somebody did that come back. But yeah, I think those are kind of the big things.
Thank you. I just wanted to know what sub-team you were on and how you think that benefited you going to college.
Yeah, absolutely. I was on the mechanical sub-team. And so at that point, my team was not doing really anything with CAD. We would draw things out on paper, and then we had a bandsaw and a drill press, and we learned what we could and couldn't make on that. And so I was part of the team that kind of built the robot. I have a ton of respect for the people on the electrical engineering team. I say even doing things around my house, I have a healthy respect for electricity. I don't need to be getting shocked. And and so that was my background, and then I think that kind of solidified for me that I wanted to focus on mechanical engineering when I got to Purdue. And then I have a couple for you all as well, if you've got an extra minute or two. Okay, so kind of what are you all most excited about for this season?
Someone said water game, we're ignoring that. So our team has some personal goals of getting the robot built much sooner. So part of that is working on guides for the build season schedule guide where it shows each week where you should be progressing one way and trying to stick to that. Last year we were still 17.
Yeah, great.
I said mine.
We've got a lot of band students who aren't here tonight, so I think the inclusion of art students was a big plus. We have a lot of push-ups.
I was in band as well. I played the trumpet and marching band and all of that, so I know how it is to split time. And then do you all have any guesses or anything you want to see in the game? You know, anything that you would love to have as part of the first game?
Water. Water.
Everything water. And we did a fall activity at one point where they were trying to predict what the game was. Part of it was speakers or scoring things, maybe the volume knob on the speakers, show your view, the count score, things like that.
Oh, interesting.
I think we also, as a group, they landed on either stairs, possibly, with backstage videos, or what?
A word wall.
Or a work wall.
We have not done a work wall. That would be interesting. That has not happened in FRC. Absolutely. I think back, like, when I was in high school, I had no idea that, like, people actually worked at First, and, like, that was a thing that you could do. And I think the cool thing, too, is that it's not just First anymore, right? Like, we have so many program partners, First in Michigan and others, where it's like you can stay local and make a huge impact. I know the First Indiana folks really well. And so there's all of these options for people to, make First their career, which I think is really neat.
Thank you. We won't leave it anywhere time, but this has been awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you all so much. Have a great night and good luck this year.